to my channel. Today's video is going to be all about macro beauty composition. So I've had so many questions lately about a composition tutorial or some advice on doing composition for macro photography in particular, and with beauty photography as well, because I think beauty photography is always a little bit hard when you just start out to find that right angle. It's a very different composition that you are looking at because you're much closer up to a person's face rather than just taking your regular portraits or something that's a bit further back. So I wanted to help out today with a little bit of advice that I've learned over the last year or so of really doing a lot of beauty photography, and just a few little tips and different types of compositions that you might want to try for your next photo shoot. Basically just tips that people have been asking for the last few weeks. So I really hope you guys enjoy today's video. I'm going to get straight into the different types of compositions that I like to use and some general tips for beauty photography right now. Okay guys, so I'm going to get straight into the macro beauty compositions that I like to do probably the most. Some of my favorite compositions that I wanted to share with you guys, because like I said before, I know it's quite hard when you're transitioning into beauty photography to work with what you have very close up, and sometimes you can really struggle for ideas when it comes to composition with beauty photography. So especially with up close stuff, it's a little bit harder to make it a little bit more interesting with the composition. So the first composition that I want to talk to you guys today about is the up the nose shot. Now this is a very kind of famous shot that a lot of beauty photographers who shoot for Vogue and Harper's Bazaar, a lot of cosmetic brands, they tend to do this shot a lot because it gives a very good overview, particularly of the eye makeup. And this is not the easiest shot to actually do. It took me quite a few times to actually experiment with it a little bit more and find out what kind of works for me with framing. And it does depend on the model's face also and where their features are sort of positioned. So I will warn you guys that it's not the easiest one to master straight off the bat, but it does make for a really good angle if you really want to show off the makeup, especially the eye makeup. So I usually find that taking this shot works best if you sort of angle just below the model's face, maybe at about a 45-degree angle, shooting from below up to the model's face. So I usually would not recommend this type of shot for models. I guess it's probably not the most flattering in terms of if you were further back, but I think it really works for macro photography and for beauty photography in particular, especially when you're close up. I usually like to include most of the nose in the shot as well because I think it frames it a little bit better, and it kind of works in with the rule of thirds a little bit more sometimes if you can usually frame that in the shot a bit more. So if you've kind of looked for guidelines on this shot, as I said, I usually like to try and frame the nose in the shot. The lips don't necessarily have to be completely in the shot, but it sometimes can make for a better angle if they are, like this one. And I'm just going to go through a few of my other shots similar to that one where I've tried the up the nose shot before as well. So there's another one with a slight eye pull as well. And here's another one of Sophia. And this is probably one of my favorite ones that I've ever taken, only because I just love how the makeup looks in it. And this is probably one of my first attempts actually at doing it. I would say the first few attempts before this didn't work out as well, but this is, I feel like, one of my first attempts that actually worked out well with the up the nose shot. So I also think it helps to have the model's face slightly on an angle, so slightly tilted to either side, to either left or right. And hopefully you guys will be able to experiment a little bit with this shot and definitely show me what you can come up with, because I'm really interested to see how other people take this shot and what works best for them too. My next beauty composition that I'm going to talk about is more of a symmetrical front-on shot. And it sounds like a pretty simple and maybe a bit boring of a shot to take, but it's pretty amazing, I think, how striking these types of shots can look, especially if you've got a model with really standout features, and particularly with the eyes, this can really create a stunning shot. So this is one of my favorite shots to start off with, and this is definitely one of the more easier ones that you can frame up straight off the bat. I'm going to go through a few of my shots that are a little bit more symmetrical and front on, but I also feel like it works for framing half the face as well. So having half the face in shot instead of the full face. So I'm going to go through a few of my other shots now that are all front on. This works very well for people with very symmetrical features. Obviously Hannah has a super symmetrical face, so it does really work really well and it looks very striking. And these are some of the half face shots that I was talking about before, so keeping half of the face in frame can really make for an interesting front-on shot that is a little bit different. So I usually find the best way to take these types of shots is just by basically standing at the model's height if possible. So if they are quite tall, maybe getting them to bend down to your level, or maybe getting a step ladder to get to their level, and really just framing up the shot very much front on and straight ahead. It's pretty much as simple as that. And the third composition that I want to talk about today is looking over the shoulder. So this is one of my favorite ones to do because I feel like it's a pose that a lot of models actually feel quite comfortable in doing. And it's really just as simple as using the shoulder, turning the model a little bit to the side and rising the shoulder up so it's in the shot more so, or down if you want the neck to look a little bit longer and extended. So I'm going to go through some of my shots to explain this technique a little bit more. And you can see here that I've just gotten the model to turn slightly to the side and lifting the shoulder just a bit more so it's in the shot. I think it's quite a flattering angle for most models, and it's something, like I said, that they do feel comfortable doing most of the time, and it just really makes for a nice framing in a shot. Now this composition is actually the one that I like the most and the one that I like to experiment with the most, and it's actually quite fun. And that is by using the hands and also the hair to create interesting compositions in beauty shots. Hands are actually quite a hard thing to work with when it comes to beauty shots and up close stuff. It can be very difficult to get a natural shot with hands and quite frustrating at times for the model and the photographer to try and make it look natural. So I usually try and shoot the outer side of the hand. There have been some exceptions in some of the photos that I've taken over the years, but most of the time it is much easier to retouch this part of the hand rather than the inside of the hand, so on the palm. This is generally the way that I prefer to photograph hands, and it's all about just making sure it's in the most relaxed position and that the model's really comfortable with however she's positioning with her hands. And this can be an issue sometimes. Sometimes you might have to work through it a little bit to get the pose that you want. So going through some of my shots here as well, I really love using strands of hair to create interesting compositions. I feel like it's just a couple of different things that you can use that will make compositions a little bit more interesting. And usually with the hair strands, it's cool to use a little bit of oil or water to make more of a wet look on the model's face, or even using a little bit of wind, like in this photo, to help blow the hair across the face. And you can keep shooting and snapping away and getting some really interesting shots with wind in particular. So here's more where we've used the strands of hair and some interesting patterns across the face. And especially for up close macro shots like this, it can really add a little bit of interest to an up close shot. And hands, once again, they have to be positioned very relaxed. I think Alison here is one of the best models I've ever had, and particularly with posing with her hands. And that's the only reason why I've included this shot of her palm, because she was just so natural with the pose. And I would usually not frame photographs like that, but she's just such a natural at doing it, so I thought I'd include it. And that's maybe a pose that you guys can try at some stage. Once again, we have Alison here with some strands across her face. This was done by getting one of my assistants on the day, probably the makeup artist, I can't quite remember at this stage, to create a little bit of wind by just moving it up and down. So it does create some really interesting shots, especially up close. And the last of my favorite compositions today that I'm going to talk about is obviously up close with details on the model's face, whether that be the eye, the skin, or even the lips on the face. These are really things that a lot of the time photographers like to focus on, and especially for cosmetic shots. So obviously with this shot, I am focusing on Siobhan's eye, and it's just a really interesting thing to be able to go up close and really look at details. I think sometimes as photographers, we do forget to do that, especially with beauty photography. We are kind of so focused on getting everything in the whole picture, but sometimes it's nice to have these close-up shots where you can really get a different composition and you can focus on the makeup even more so. So here's just a few shots that I have taken of up-close features of a model's face. I usually try to work with rule of thirds when it comes to these types of shots as well, because I think that sometimes it's hard to photograph in particular eyes and find a good composition for that if you're looking at doing a portrait
and not a square crop. So this is generally the way that I like to photograph those types of photographs, and I hope you guys have learnt something from all these compositions today, and let me know what your favorites are.
Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please click the subscribe button and the notification bell so you can see all the videos that I have to post in future. And hopefully you guys enjoyed this macro photography video today. And if you have any other compositions that you like to try within your own macro beauty photography, please list them in the comment section below, and I would love to hear from you guys. So thank you so much for watching again, and I will see you next time. Bye.